So it's very important. It's two nuclear-armed countries facing each other like this incident happened in February. I, as the Prime Minister of a country, am saying that anything can happen in such situations. You don't know what can happen. We should never be in this situation. That's why I will be speaking in UN. I would want the United Nations to play a role. This is why the United Nations came into being. This could have effects way beyond the subcontinent.
Since India's tradition, not just this government, but other governments, has been not to accept third-party mediation, it seems to me it's beholden on India and Pakistan to essentially break this dynamic, which has obviously gotten worse after what's happened in Kashmir. Might it not make sense for Pakistan, and given where we began our conversation, you've got economic priorities and the rest, the last thing you need is a worsening strategic situation in South Asia. Might it not make sense for Pakistan to think of way of at least reestablishing some sort of an opening for diplomacy?
Just look at the situation right now. There are 8 million Kashmiris for 50 days have been shot inside. 50 days, 900,000 Indian troops have shot in their homes, 8 million Kashmiris. How am I going to talk about what? And unilaterally, they have reneged on international laws. This was a disputed territory, Kashmir, between Pakistan and India. The United Nations, the Security Council, had given the people of Kashmir the right of self-determination, which was never given to them. Now, how do we start talking to anyone? How can we speak to India? At least what I expect the international community to do is to ask them to lift the curfew. It's inhuman. It's violation of every humanitarian right of the people of Kashmir.
I should just tell the members here before I go to questions is that the Indian Foreign Minister will be here later this week, so I expect we will return to some of these.
I hope you'll ask proper questions. Not be too diplomatic.
So we will have Ambassador Foreign Minister Jaishankar here. So it's now the appointed hour. Remember, this is on the record, and the shorter the questions are, the more succinct, the more we can get in. Nikki, you have your hand up. Just wait for a microphone. Let us know who you are and your organizational affiliation.
Hi, good morning. I'm Minky Worden from Human Rights Watch. Our discussion today has proceeded without any mention of rights for 150 million women and girls in Pakistan. As Human Rights Watch has documented, there are serious problems with education, forced marriage, child marriage, and honor killings. What are your plans to deliver justice and accountability for women and girls? Thanks.
Our main plank of our manifesto is rule of law. All the things you're saying is because we have weak enforcement of law. We have laws protecting women, we have laws protecting the weak, the minorities, and at times when violations take place, it's because our enforcement, our implementation is weak. But I can tell you right now, 13 months, we have taken steps to protect our minorities. We have taken steps to protect the worship places of the minorities. The initiative which we have taken with the Sikh community is opening up the Kartarpur corridor is unprecedented. We are now in the process of restoring places of worship because Pakistan was also the center of Buddhist civilization and also the Hindu shrines. So my concept of Pakistan is where our minorities are equal citizens. They have all their rights are protected. All the women, the weaker sections, the poor people in our country, we have come up with the biggest ever population program despite our fiscal constraints. It is one of in our history, it's the biggest poverty alleviation campaign which we've started. So to sum it up, my idea of Pakistan is basically rule of law and not just protecting the weaker sections of the society, but also helping those areas of Pakistan that have stayed back, like FATA. FATA has merged with Pakistan for the first time with KP, and we have spent funds to rehabilitate the people of FATA because of the war on terror.
Just so you understand, in the World Economic Forum report, Pakistan comes in.
Is what you're saying that the challenge is to enforce existing laws, or do you really need new laws and new programs to help girls and women have opportunity?
You don't need new laws, but you need special packages for those sections of the society which have been left behind, which includes, this program we have is one of the biggest, the most comprehensive program for women in rural areas to lift them out of poverty.
Sure. Jeffrey.
Jeff Laurenti. Mr. Prime Minister, following up on your answer just now, which broadened the aperture from women to the minorities in Pakistan, and Richard's earlier question about radicalization there, you have seen bombings of Shiite mosques in Quetta and elsewhere, the assassination of Governor Salman Taseer by an Islamic extremist, the capital death penalty case of Asia Bibi, who was finally allowed out of Pakistan for being a Christian who didn't entirely reverence the Prophet Muhammad. And you have publishers who are fearful of Islamist attacks and such. Is there any progress to be made on reforming those blasphemy laws, and how pervasive is the sense of the tiny minority of fundamentalists being able to employ violence in order to enforce religious conformity? And do you get help from elsewhere in the Muslim world, like Saudi Arabia, at being able to progress toward a more moderate Islam?
Okay, first let me clear one thing. There is only one Islam. There's no such thing as moderate Islam or radical Islam. I even heard yesterday that there was this radical Islam. There is only one Islam. Islam, like all human communities, has its radicals, majority moderates, and then of course some lunatics who every human society has it. There you might have your racists. When I first went to England, there were these skinheads who would beat up people because of the color of their skin. So there is only one Islam, and the Islam we follow is the Islam of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that Islam, according to the Prophet, all of us are born children of Adam, so we are all equal, regardless of our color of our skin. That Islam gave complete rights to minorities. In the state of Medina he created, a Jewish citizen wins a case against the Khalifa, the head of state. He loses a case against a Jewish citizen, which means that they were equal citizens if they could stand and win against the head of state. That's the Islam we follow. In my vision of Islam, all human beings, regardless of their religion, are equal. Now, if we have not been able to enforce our laws, it's because, unfortunately, we have ruling elites that have kept themselves above law. And when that happens, and Pakistan is not the only country like this. There are countries where you have sections of populations, the elites, above the law. And when that happens, there is no rule of law. Then might is right. So my party is called Tehreek-e-Insaf, Movement for Justice. And justice means justice for all human beings. In fact, for me, justice means for animals too. Because in the state of Medina, who we look up, for Muslims there is only one model, and that is the Prophet created the state of Medina. That state of Medina gave rights to women first time, property rights. That state of Mnister first introduced progressive taxation. First welfare state. State took responsibility of handicapped, orphans, widows, poor. That state of Medina had rule of law. No one was above law. So, and as I quote, a Jewish citizen could win a case against the head of state. That's the state we want. That's the ideal we move to. Unfortunately, we are not close to that ideal, and this is why 13 months on the line, we have, at least what we have done is, no one would have touched the criminals who plundered our country. No one would have been able to put them in jail because there was one law for the powerful and the other for the weak. So it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but this is my ideal.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. My name is Rina Amiri. I'm from NYU, and I'm an Afghan American. And you're right that Afghans are tired of war. They desperately want peace. And they supported Ambassador Khalilzad's efforts. But it was a peace process that left them deeply anxious, and they felt it was imbalanced in favor of the Taliban and that it emboldened the Taliban. They would seek the support of Pakistan for reigniting peace talks, but one in which a number of the issues that they are concerned about are on the table, including having talks with the Afghan government either directly or through proximity talks. They want more explicit language from the Taliban on women's rights and minority rights, and they want more explicit language denouncing terrorism or links to Al-Qaeda, none of which were there when this agreement was nearly signed. Thank you. I would just like your comments, and if that peace process, or if and hopefully when it's reignited, what support can the Afghan people get from Pakistan in this regard? Thank you.
Well, number one, what the people of Afghanistan have gone through, forget me as a Pakistani, as a human being, we should all pray that they have peace. Because, you know, I've watched, you hear every day on a daily basis the sort of bloodshed that's going on. Now, I just repeat very quickly, there are only two ways right now. One is we keep going this way, which is military action, and I believe this will just keep going on. And because the Taliban, the moment they realize that the Americans already, they've cut the troops down, and if they think they're leaving, I mean, they're not going to give up, you know, with more military action. The peace talks. Now, peace talks, once they start, all this can be thrashed out. I honestly believe that this is not the Taliban of 2001. There's a lot of things that have happened, and I believe that they will be more accommodating. The Taliban delegation wanted to meet me. Problem was that the Afghan government did not want me to meet the Taliban delegation, so I didn't meet them. But I told President Ghani, I said, look, if I meet them, I would try and convince them about all the things you're saying. And not only that, I would try and convince them that the Taliban must talk to the Afghan government. At the moment, they're only talking to the Americans. There are no direct talks between Taliban and the Afghan government. I would have tried my best. Because finally, I mean, yes, people they've looked at 2001 and that period, and they think that, you know, the way Taliban behaved at the time, minorities and so on, with the attitude to women. But I think once the talk starts, I think all these things will eventually fall into place because the people of Afghanistan, both sides, want peace right now.
Jeffrey Rosen.
Thank you. Jeffrey Rosen from Lazard. You described earlier the relationship with China that's been developing, an economic relationship. I'm curious how you reconcile that relationship with reports about the treatment by the Chinese of Muslim churches, Muslim mosques, the practice of Islam in China. Whether you're able to use this as a means, the relationship as a means of pressuring the Chinese to perhaps relax in that treatment.
And if not, whether you raise the risk of perhaps some of the more radical elements of Islam in Pakistan, acknowledging there's not radical Islams, but there are radical Islamic people who practice Islam who are radical, whether you run the risk of a reaction from them domestically, which could unsettle the country, your country.
Particularly given what the Chinese are doing, with the Uyghurs.
With the Chinese, we have a any of issues like these, we talk to them privately. We don't make public statements because that's how China is. And I again repeat, I mean, China has come to a help when as someone who has taken over Pakistan 13 months ago, faced the biggest economic crisis to dealing with that. We have a problem in Afghanistan trying to settle that. We are worried about what would happen now with Iran and Saudi Arabia, the United States. That's the other border. So one border Iran, the other Afghanistan, and now with India. I think I've got enough on my plate right now. Wouldn't you say, Richard? What would you do if you were in my position? You'll probably have a heart attack by now.
Unlikely. I would welcome that conversation.
Listen, the only reason I can cope with these pressures is because, when you walk out on not a lot of you won't understand cricket, but imagine, you're walking out on a cricket field, there are 90,000 people in the stadium. You walk 70 yards down into the middle of the pitch, and the worry that you can be out first ball and you will have to walk all the way back with 90,000 people. So that takes character. It builds. So you are able to play under pressure once you cope with that, and that's the only way I have coped, and Richard, you would not have been able to. I'm telling you.
Every golfer knows what it's like at the first tee when the crowds are there.
Golf is a piece of
We could continue that, but I will show uncharacteristic discipline. Sure.
Michelle Caruso-Cabrera, CNBC contributor, following on the conversation about China. Richard asked you very directly about maintaining your sovereignty in the face of so many Chinese loans, and you didn't answer it directly. I mean, you've talked about China coming in when you were rock bottom, but are you concerned about the trade-off that level of investment presents to Pakistan?
Absolutely not. I mean, for instance, I mean, what would China, how would it impinge on our sovereignty? Maybe they would say, don't have a good relationship with the US. But the Chinese have never, ever interfered in any of our foreign policy, in any of our domestic policy for that matter. I think China sees Pakistan as the CPEC, this economic corridor and the Belt and Road Initiative. They see this as a great opportunity for them. I think China is one country which we can all learn from. Their main concentration has been on trade and wealth creation and lifting the standard of living of their people. What I admire about China the most, in 30 years they have taken 700 million people out of poverty. It's never been done in human history. And when I came, if you ask me, what is the one thing I want in Pakistan? Lift 100 million Pakistanis out of poverty. This is our main thing. So that's where we have learned a lot from China, how they tackle poverty in these last 30 years. So the answer to the question, there have been no demands by China which restrict our sovereignty.
Are you not put off that China has accomplished what you said, but they've done it at a great price and cost in terms of democracy, human rights, and the rest, not just for Muslim Chinese, but for all Chinese? Are you not put off by that aspect of the cost of their development model?
Well, who am I to comment on China? But the fact is that if any human society can accomplish this, this is humane. This is taking people out of poverty. I mean, I admire that the most. For me, if I had, but I don't have, unfortunately, the Chinese model, and if I could order people around, and I could get people out of poverty. Not just that, the way they've tackled corruption. Unfortunately, I can't do that in Pakistan. 450 ministerial level people in the last 5 years have been put into jail on corruption. I mean, I wish I could do that in my country. But, we have our limitations, but it has to be admired what they've done in terms of taking what China is now. I mean, 30 years ago, you wouldn't believe what they've been able to achieve.
Mary Boyce.
Mary Boyce Schiller. The attack on the Saudi oil last weekend, if the response were left entirely to you, what would the response be?
Mary, I am and will always be a pacifist. I am anti-war. I do not believe wars solve problems. You go to solve one problem, you give birth to 5 other problems. You go after Al-Qaeda, you create ISIS. I do not believe wars solve problems, unfortunately. I would do everything to resolve this issue through diplomacy. I would be trying my best, because if there is a conflict there, the consequences, I mean, just look at the poorer countries. Do people care about poor countries? Imagine if oil prices go up. And we are struggling finally to sort of try and balance our budget. This will just immediately throw everything for us. And so we already have the war on terror. 70,000 Pakistanis died. And it's a lesson my government, people of Pakistan have learned, that we will avoid conflict at everything. And we can't afford another conflict going on in our neighborhood.
Yes, ma'am. You've been very patient.
Masuda Sultan, All in Peace, a coalition of Afghans and Americans looking to end the longest war in American history. I wanted to thank you for your comments on Afghanistan and the war, and you've been supportive of U.S. efforts at peace negotiations. To offer to take as the Pakistani Prime Minister to advance the dialogue. For example, you mentioned that you didn't meet the Taliban when the Afghan government requested you not to. So what other steps do you intend to take? And how does the Kashmir issue complicate, or does it the Afghan issue?
What I was planning to do was, this deal was about to be signed. The moment this deal was going to be signed, I would have met the Taliban leaders, and I would have immediately made them sit with the Afghan government. So that was the last thing left. At the moment, the Taliban were only talking to the Americans. And so once they had, the deal was signed, then we would have got them to talk to the Afghan government. I would have tried my best. And I feel that was the way ahead. We just read the tweet about the talks breaking down. I wish we had been consulted and we would have tried our best. This was always, the fact that President Trump felt that because of, the terrorist attack, because of that, he had broken off talks. But, when you are fighting and at the same time, this was always going to happen. But they have to stay the course. So I will be trying my best to convince President Trump to resume the talks.
To what extent are you using Twitter as a tool of political persuasion and reaching out to your own population or to India's? To what extent is Twitter a tool for you?
I try my best to convey my feelings. I do feel, Richard, I honestly feel, I'm sitting in front of you, I have known India. I have had love and respect from India and fan following because India loves cricket more than any other Pakistani. I'm more worried about India right now than probably even Pakistan, because India is not heading in the right direction. If you see what has happened in India in the last 6 years, it is frightening for some of us. It's not the India I know of Gandhi and Nehru. It is this ideology that has taken over India of Hindu supremacy. And this, whenever such an ideology takes over, there's always something they blame. You have to hate someone to be, supreme and an exclusive Hindu India. This is the ideology that assassinated Gandhi. This is the ideology was banned in India for 3 times. And now, unfortunately, it is running India. And I fear, because I think you can reason, as long as you can reason with people, the 2 nuclear-armed countries need not worry about anything. But unfortunately, with this ideology of racial supremacy, I don't think you can reason, and I'm generally worried. And that's why I'm speaking to the heads of state. I've just spoken to Prime Minister Boris Johnson. I will speak to Donald Trump. I will speak to other leaders. I will speak in the UN. I'll try my best that the world must intervene before this goes too far.
That is a sober place to stop. The Prime Minister has to get to a meeting with the Chinese delegation, so I promised we'd let him out. Before I thank him, just a reminder, we've got the President of Angola later this morning at 11. In Washington at 12:30 today, we've got the Acting Secretary, Department of Homeland Security. Tomorrow we have the Saudi Foreign Minister as well as a climate change symposium. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for coming here. Thank you for asking our questions. I look forward to continuing the conversation on what you might do, as well as cricket versus golf. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Always a pleasure.
न्यूयॉर्क में काउंसिल ऑन फॉरेन रिलेशंस में मुबाहसे में वज़ीर-ए-आज़म इमरान खान की सवालों के जवाब दिए।